never notice when it's actually going live. So I better just get started then. Okay, here I am, and it's Thursday morning, and it is the 20th of January 2022. I've got the date right this time. Bit muddled up with the days sometimes. I'm reading out of Lydia, a story I wrote in continuation of Bliss After Life, which was a story about Bliss passing into the afterlife at 95, or shortly after her birthday, and we're following her into the afterlife in the book Bliss After Life. And the story also deals with a reincarnation, and the second book, Lydia, is the reincarnation, which has been born, is now over a month old, 2 months old, and we are in 2012, in late spring. No, not in late spring, in spring. Chapter 28. Anna, Melanie, Tony, and Pete meeting at the Refuge. Peter and Tony had spent the drive talking non-stop. They had been listening to Steve's new CD and had pondered on the conversations about the last few weeks. Everyone had their different views on it, and Tony wanted to hear what Peter actually felt about Melanie, or Mio. Typically, Peter had been slower to talk, but then Tony was surprised when he found out that Peter had quite an interest into the ethereal realms. He was amazed to hear that he had always been into sci-fi, and in recent years many of the books Peter read were non-fiction and into quantum physics. He seemed to not only have studied architecture, but also other fascinating stuff about the field, which Tony had only recently read about himself and discussed with his mum. It turned out that Peter could not wait to hear more from Melanie or Mio, more to the point. Tony had no idea that not only was he looking forward to seeing Anna, his own girlfriend, he was impatient to hear more from his girlfriend Melanie too. They arrived at the house in no time. He couldn't even remember the drive, still shaking his head, smiling to himself, when he drew up in the front of the Refuge and hooted his horn. The door was opened wider, and he saw Melanie and Anna laughing, coming running out to greet them. "I can smell something lovely even from out here." Peter stretched his long legs out of the car and took Anna in his arms. It felt almost strange to have her here, in his arms, and she was smiling, having wondered how their greeting would be. They kissed. Neither Tony nor Melanie had time to notice. Melanie had her arms around his neck and was whispering into Tony's ear. "For real?" Peter and Anna stopped and looked at the couple, who were both laughing. "Yes, for real. I have to say it out loud. And now I can. I am pregnant, guys. I shall have a little Milton. In January 2013. We shall have a little Milton. It seems I have no say in the matter. Gosh, I have to sit down." Tony was not even really joking. He suddenly felt distinctly wobbly. Happy, though. He was glad. They were all heading for the front door. The kitchen looked lovely and smelled amazing. He plonked himself on the chair and drew Melanie onto his lap. Anna was pulling Peter along the kitchen, through the utilities to her quarters. "We shall leave you in peace. I think we need to sit down ourselves after this greeting." She was smiling at Melanie, just remembering their conversation earlier when she thought there was a radiance. She wanted Peter to herself anyway. Seeing him again had all been much easier than she thought. Chapter 29. David in his new house. They had spent the last 2 days moving into Hillary's cottage. David thought that eventually he will stop calling it that, even to himself. They had much fun furnishing the room. Hillary had left quite a lot. They had agreed a lump sum price once they had gone through it all. Hillary had taken some of her favorite furnishings, etc., but her new flat was much smaller, and she had no need for most of the things which had accumulated, and some were a very good start for David. He'd been pondering how much he should ship over here from the storage place he had to rent for his previous belongings in Australia. Apart from some instrument, a few other things, when he thought about it, but he was feeling great starting afresh. Some of Hillary's pieces were beautiful, antique, and he liked them, but he felt that much will have to go. He wanted to make this place his own, or even theirs. No decision needed to be made at this moment, but Susan enjoyed the process as much as he did. You know, Steve would have taken the lot back in the days. Susan had just come into the shed where he was painting a bookshelf. Yes, you said he owned an antique shop. Do you think it would be odd to invite him and Savannah over? I'd love to see him again. There has been much water under the bridge, and hearing you say that... Thinking about it, no, not odd really. As it happens, we both have new relationships. We never hated each other, even after the initial breakup. Ben was our main concern, and we managed quite well, I think. I'd love it, actually. We can easily put up guests here now, and with Lydia's arrival, we have been in touch more recently. If you don't mind, then I don't mind. They were laughing about it. Recently, there have been many occasions where they were of the same mind. Their relationship had developed so fast, and their conversations were always interesting. David, you know what? Here's Steve's mobile number. Send him a text and just invite him over for a housewarming. I shall do that. I'll tell him that I would love his view on the furniture. This bookshelf stays. He was wiping his hands. It looked great after the polish and varnish. He enjoyed upcycling, and had done a lot of it back in his old home. It relaxed him, and he could spend ages on a piece, sanding it and making it look fresh again. Susan was looking at it admiringly. It's funny, but I had been thinking about that. Although grateful to have the house looking inviting already, I know you want a completely different style in the long run, right? Yes, I'm not really into these dainty antique pieces. I can see their quality, but I really like sort of more rough planks, polished railway sleepers, or even distressed wardrobe. You seem to be in the middle of antiquity yourself. Your refuge is all a mix of styles. Your home is also very mixed at home. He was smiling to himself. There's no accounting for taste. Susan was laughing. The refuge was a large accumulation of Honora's travels. Her husband had been very wealthy, and there were some special pieces in her house, but she had to sell quite a lot of pictures and silver when she needed money. Honora had stopped caring for any of it when Susan moved in, and over the years the place had become a mixture of old and new, upcycled and modernized. My own home is more like me, extended and hopefully enhanced. They were both laughing now. I think, like with many things, age leads to depth and improvement. David closed her mouth with a kiss. Chapter 30. Melanie and Tony enjoy the news of Milton. After they had greeted each other with copious kisses, Melanie got up to make them a cup of tea. She wanted to discuss Milton, and so did Tony. When did you find out? Tony was still shell-shocked. This was completely unexpected. Although having Lydia around for the last few weeks did bring paternal instincts, and he had pondered on his feelings with regard to babies for a while. Only just. I had to throw up quite violently, and suddenly when I woke up, I knew. Did Mio not prepare you? Tony could still not really get his head around the relationship Melanie had with them. Melanie was laughing. No, not really. Not beforehand, anyway. They're not fortune-tellers, you know. She couldn't stop laughing. Having had Mio in her head for so long with all that wisdom, she had tried in the past to find out what tomorrow would bring. When young, she had even asked if she could get her desired Christmas presents. But Mio had explained long ago that the future is being shaped in the now. Even if they did know what was hidden in her mother's wardrobe, why she bought it, and all the individual decisions which made up life, they cannot predict. Her own higher self will have planned it somewhat. But Mio had no insight into the ways things play out exactly, although it was known she would have children. Much of this was planned and contracted. Melanie herself was here to help Gaia, and she had been made aware of this very early on in her consciousness as a human being back in 3D. There had been many pioneers over centuries who came with their own knowledge and consciousness and the larger picture of existence to teach, but most importantly, to be, to share the compassion they felt, working in small groups, families, all over the planet. When she was told of this new era, which was approaching her as a child. It was like a fairy story, and it mixed with the stories of old. In her teenage years, she gained insight into the shift humanity was experiencing. She rejected Mio for a time. It had got too complicated, and she wanted to be a teenager with all that brings. Her parents' death was when she was 16, and had been truly devastating, not only because she missed them, but also had to accept her role at an instant. She could not bear the thought that they were gone forever out of her life. Mio was right here, there, for her, and so were both her grandmothers. She knew her parents were aware of her life and wanted her happy, coping with being an orphan. Although she never felt like an orphan. She was living with her grandmother, spent time in Germany with her other grandma, her Omi. She had done this often growing up. Her parents were gone, but these connections made it all much easier. She loved being with them by herself. All these realizations usually take time for people who experience deep loss. For her, the conversations with Mio, alone in the garden, in the bath, in the kitchen, cooking, were instrumental in making her feel that her life had a purpose. I'm glad that I didn't know. Of course, I have since then, on the drive here, been informed that Milton is necessary. Lydia needs a like-minded contemporary. Our children are part of the new children, Tony. The new children, please. Children are always new, and every time they're born. Melanie was laughing again, hugging herself. She felt like jumping up and down. Oh, wow, I do love it when things click in my head, and this morning the drive here was riveting. She gave Tony a smacking kiss. You see, I know that Lydia came here to bring light into our family, which, if you had not noticed, is extremely multicultural. However, not only into our family, but into the world. You mean like Jesus? Tony was laughing too now. Yes, like Jesus. Melanie couldn't help for laughing. As Lydia was female, this became more comical by the minute in her head. Anna and Peter had finished their tour and greetings and came into the kitchen to see what the two of them were positively falling about laughing. What about Jesus is so funny? Peter had overheard the last remark, and by now all four of them were laughing. God, sorry, let me sit down. Tony pulled Melanie back onto his lap. He took a deep breath. Lydia and Blob Milton are going to be like Jesus, bringing the light to humanity. He had to start laughing again. Sorry. Okay, let me explain. Sorry, Peter. I have no idea how much you know about Mio. Everything that Anna knows, which isn't enough. They were all laughing again. That's great. Well, Tony was asking me if I had been prepared for this pregnancy beforehand. But it doesn't work like that. She had to laugh again, and got up to blow her nose and wipe her eyes. A feeling of overwhelming happiness as well as anxiety overcame her. You're going to give our children a Jesus complex before they're even grown. Tony had to start laughing again, and everybody joined. Start saving for therapy bills. Seems more important than education. Peter's belly laugh rang through the kitchen. Okay, let me explain. Melanie sat down and took a deep breath. She would let Mio do the talking, and everybody recognized the change in her. Peter held his breath. He couldn't believe this was happening. He had read so much about metaphysics and theory, and there he was in Susan's kitchen, in her refuge, where he spent much time as a youngster, reading science fiction over his breakfast. And this was real. Mio. There are many more new children coming here now. It began in earnest a few decades ago. Around the time you were all born, it had already started. There have always been way shells over time here, pioneers of the mind, often walking a difficult path, as this planet has been brutal in its development over a long time. You will be the nurturers of these new generations of compassionate, loving light showers. The new energies are needed here. Gaia herself is turning to a higher vibration, and along with all that, upon her. Humanity has gained much knowledge, is sharing technology, much influence can be affected, positive and negative. The time has come for all to vibrate at higher frequency. Compassion and love are the highest tunes there are. Humanity has the capacity to wipe itself out several times over now. Gaia could have been a lonely planet if some of these impulses had been acted upon. You are being watched. Over time, a slower instrumental process was taking place towards the light, but also towards the dark. What is needed is a turnaround for humanity's consciousness to recognize itself. The new children come as old children, pure, but they do not need to work on their karma anymore. They begin fresh and will be much more mindful of the principles which guide true abundance and joy, natural, universal. All babies over the time can see much more than you can. In the first 6 months of their lives, you did yourself see vibrations and spirit when you came. Like certain animals, their perspective is filled with frequency. Love, anger, joy, they feel with an open awareness. The adult world believes them to be tiny, ignorant, helpless, barely distinguishing the people and objects in their life, and that emotions are given to them by the elders surrounding them, many not realizing the imprint they leave or enhance by the way they speak, the way they feel in themselves. The new children will maintain their insight for longer. They develop it, some earlier, some later. They are born into families which are often connected in their soul group. Many will not be disciplined to be logical and well-behaved all the time. Parents of these children will soon recognize that their offspring has a good mind, much love, enjoys making up stories, hates sitting down too long, and is forever inquisitive. Many will learn to read and write without much effort, but can be willful and non-conformist. When older, they will find themselves teaching through being. We will also have the difficult children, the ones who are not fitting into their family or who are troublesome at their schools, and they will find their soul group through their path of life. The older generations have to be the guides, and there are many good souls on this path. Many do not know any of this consciously, but find themselves instrumental in helping to pave the way. Enlarging the number of souls who have been helped on this path by others, who feel much compassion and love. Peter, you are one of these helpers on their path, and you feel much compassion and love. You were helped by Susan, and you have gone on to forge your path to purpose, ever interested in the ethereal but very quiet about it. Melanie smiled and was back in her body, leaning against Tony, who kissed her cheek. He liked it when she was back. He had again switched his phone on to record the words. It was now Mio number 2. He smiled to himself. He had to chat to Ben about it, because it seemed time to get organized. This was the end of chapter 30, and I'm wishing all a lovely Thursday.